Welcome back, everybody. I'm so happy that you're joining me. As always, please subscribe if you aren't already. I'd love to see you back next time too. So I wanted to take a little time today to talk about the power of familiar and the power of patterns. And I don't mean always power in a good way. So this is kind of two topics, but I roped them into one because I think that there's a lot of crossover. So hopefully this makes some sense. First off, I first started understanding this concept when I was seeing the psychologist for my flying phobia. Along with other things, one of the treatments prescribed to me was during that time to simply fly. We have a nearby aviation school, and it was arranged for me to go there once a week for a period of time and just fly with the pilots in the school planes. These were small planes and of course didn't go as high or as fast as jets or commercial flights, but I would go there. I would spend about an hour there each time. We would take off land, over and over again. And of course, I was seeking help for my flying phobia because I was petrified to fly. So this was not easy for me at first. I was terrified, anxious, panicky, all of the above. But slowly but surely, it did get easier to drive to that school and go up in those little planes. Now, why did that work? Why does desensitization work? Well, the brain is complex, so I don't think that there's a simple one-line answer for that, but one of the reasons is because going up and down in those planes over and over again made flying become familiar to my brain. The sensation, the sounds, the feelings of flying all of a sudden went from something my brain experienced maybe once a year to something it experienced an hour every week. One of the most primitive and primary roles of our brains is to keep us safe. If we have experienced something over and over again, and it has been relatively safe over and over again, then the brain recognizes that thing as a non-threat. It logs it in the, yes, I've seen this before and it's okay file. I read a doctor describe it like this one time. Imagine a little gatekeeper desk sitting in your mind at all time, and that gatekeeper is constantly being sent files to look at. Everything we do, everything we see, everything that we hear, it all gets funneled to the gatekeeper. And if the gatekeeper recognizes the experience, if it is familiar, then the gatekeeper approves that file and sends it along to the next chain of command. But if the gatekeeper sees a file it doesn't recognize, the gatekeeper sends big red flashing warning lights to get all of the working parts of the brain focused instantly. All of a sudden, all hands need to be on deck to assess this new situation and figure out a way out of this potential threat. And anxiety, panic, even just uneasy feelings can happen in relatively safe situations because of this phenomenon. We may be in a safe environment, but if that environment is new to us, if it is an unfamiliar situation, unfamiliar sounds or sensations, the brain starts sending off big flashing danger zone signals to our bodies. And the body reacts to what the brain is telling it by doing all the things it would normally do if we were actually in an unsafe situation. So this phenomenon doesn't just apply to things happening acutely to us, like going up in a plane, for example, but this can be kind of a chronic thing that affects our day-to-day, operations. And this brings me to my second point, which is patterns. The brain likes familiar. It likes patterns. It likes familiar patterns. We feel safe in familiar. We feel safe in what we know. If we've done it before, even if there's something better waiting on us outside the normal familiar patterns, it's hard to break out of them. Have you ever known someone who was in a bad relationship and then they finally break out of that relationship only to end up back with another person who is just as bad for them for all the same reasons as the last relationship? Well, to that person trapped in that cycle, the bad relationship is familiar. It fits into a pattern that their brain knows and is accustomed to. From the outside looking in, it seems so clear, so easy for an outsider to say, man, if they just broke that pattern and found a new one, life would be so much better for them. But that's easy to see from the outside. That person's mind is entrenched in a familiar pattern. And for someone stuck inside that pattern, it takes a lot of strength for that person to overpower that pattern and convince the mind to dig its way out of that pattern. And the longer a pattern exists, the more time that passes, the harder it will be for that person to get their minds to move towards something different. It's kind of like ruts in a muddy dirt road. You drive over those same ruts day in and day out, and the ruts just get deeper and deeper and deeper. And as the ruts get deeper, it would become much more harder to drive out of them. But it doesn't mean you can't, and it doesn't mean that there's not a vast new territory waiting for you if you could just get out of the ruts. The brain's power to attach to patterns can be amazing. This is one of the reasons you can likely tie your shoe without even thinking about it or realizing that you're tying it. At one point, you probably don't remember it, but at one point in your life, tying your shoe was a process of intricate steps. It was hard to learn at first. You likely had to think about the steps, concentrate on them. But now, it's a familiar pattern. Your brain can, execute that task and do that thing without spending valuable attention or energy to complete it. So that's a good thing. And there's a lot of amazing complex tasks that our brains carry out for us throughout every single day of our lives, seemingly with very little effort, attention, or energy. But what we don't want is to become powerless to the patterns, powerless to familiar. We should always be mindful of which ruts are being dug in our minds and always mindful of how our gatekeeper is handling our files. So I challenge you to challenge yourself. Exercise your mind by breaking a pattern and see what it feels like. Even something small and silly, maybe you always watch TV before going to bed, so try reading a chapter of a book instead. Or maybe switch up your lunch routine. If you're always someone who's on the phone in the afternoon, maybe make it a point, to not have your phone with you for an hour. Maybe start making yourself do 10 minutes of exercise before dinner, or maybe instead of eating dinner in front of a TV, sit at the table. Light some candles before bed instead of using a ceiling light. I don't know, be creative with whatever works for your life and in your world. But just see how it feels to break a small part of your routine. Try to do that new or different thing for a few days in a row. You might be surprised about how that makes you feel. And the deeper your ruts are, the deeper set in your ways and your routine you are, and the more profound it probably is going to feel to break those patterns. And then take that experience and think about it in other more important areas of your life. Don't be afraid to evaluate your patterns and challenge yourself to break one. Or recognize you've been afraid to try something unfamiliar and push yourself out of your comfort zone. We should always be challenging ourselves past what we think we know, what we've always done, what we've always been told to do, what we've always thought. Challenge your ideas, your perspectives, your abilities. Try to see something that you've never seen before, or figure out something that you've never realized before. Do something you have never done before. It's uncomfortable to push out of comfort zones, but you have to force yourself out of the ruts when necessary. It'll be bumpy, but once you get over them, a whole different path may present itself to you. Alright guys, I hope that you have a great rest of the day, and I hope to see you back next time. Please subscribe if you're not already, and we'll talk again soon. Bye!